When Harriet Beecher Stowe met Abraham Lincoln at the White House in 1862, the president reportedly greeted her with, "So you're the little lady who wrote the book that started this great war." As Stowe shook the president's hand, her masterpiece, Uncle Tom's Cabin, which had been published 10 years earlier, had already sold 2 million copies in the US alone, making it the best-selling novel in American history by proportion of population. The book brought Queen Victoria to tears, sold out at Southern bookstores despite being outlawed, and fortified President Lincoln in the days leading up to his decision to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. But above all, Uncle Tom's Cabin deliberately drove a dagger into the most vulnerable point in America's conscience: slavery's assault on Black families, especially children. And who was this mastermind behind the radical story? A mom of 6 who wrote by candlelight once her babies were in bed. Meet Harriet. Here's her story. Welcome to Strong Stories. This channel is all about telling the stories of influential and brave women who shaped history. If you like good stories, hit the subscribe button and the bell too, so you don't miss an episode. Harriet Beecher was born in 1811 into a remarkable Connecticut family. Her father, the Reverend Lyman Beecher, let it be known that his children, all 11 of them, were expected to make their mark on the world. All 7 of Harriet's brothers became ministers. Her oldest sister pioneered for women's education, and her youngest sister founded the National Women's Suffrage Association. Harriet, the middle child, didn't know what impact she could make, but from an early age, she loved to write, and her pen began winning prizes. Most unusually for females in the early 1800s, Harriet received a formal education, attending one of the only academies in the country which encouraged girls to learn the same material as boys, instead of limiting them to ornamental arts. Armed with as much knowledge in mathematics, history, and language as any man could hope to acquire, Harriet became a teacher at Hartford Female Seminary, founded by her older sister. Lively family discussions around a presumably enormous dinner table sharpened her debate prowess and inspired her writing, for which the young woman was gaining a growing reputation. When Harriet was 21, her family uprooted their Yankee digs and resettled in the bustling frontier river port of Cincinnati, where her father would serve as a seminary president. When an errand brought Harriet across the Ohio River to the Kentucky side, she suddenly found herself face to face with a slave auction. Distressed by the cruel spectacle, Harriet would revive the scenes in stirring prose 20 years later in Uncle Tom's Cabin. In 1832, Harriet joined a literary club where she met and fell in love with Calvin Stowe, a Bible professor at her father's seminary, who she described as rich in Greek and Hebrew, Latin and Arabic, and alas, rich in nothing else. The coming years brought marriage and 7 children, including twin daughters. Meanwhile, Cincinnati was becoming ground zero for the great issue of the day: fugitive slaves. Directly across the Ohio River from the slave South, the boomtown drew a steady stream of escaped slaves fleeing north to freedom, as well as the bounty hunters hot on their trails. Harriet, now Harriet Beecher Stowe, befriended a number of fugitives, welcoming them into her home as part of the Underground Railroad and hearing their stories and seeing their scars with her own eyes. Their stories captured her. A devoutly Christian African-American gentleman weeping in memory of children sold downriver, but forgiving the slave traders all the same. A desperate fugitive crossing the Ohio River in winter by leaping between ice floes. A child born to parents whose owner forced them to produce children as a commodity, like farm animals. All real people Stowe became familiar with. Their stories were unforgettable to her, and she would soon make them unforgettable to the world. In 1849, Stowe lost her 1-year-old son, Samuel, to cholera. The blow broke her heart, but as she testified later, it allowed her to better understand the pain of slave parents who are separated from their children forever due to their master's greed. The following year, Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Law, forcing Northerners to return escaped slaves to the South. Outraged, Stowe's sister told her, "Hattie, if I could use a pen as you can, I would write something that will make this whole nation feel what an accursed thing slavery is." Stowe told her, "If I live, I will." As busy by day as only a mother of 6 can be, Stowe began to write by candlelight once the children were tucked into bed. Night after night, she put to words scenes and characters that would soon become famous around the globe. Besides her own experiences in Cincinnati, Stowe drew freely from descriptions of slave owners themselves. Advertisements in Southern newspapers seeking the return of escaped slaves had been collected and published verbatim by abolitionist Theodore Weld in a book entitled American Slavery as It Is. Listings such as, "He will probably aim for Savannah as he said he had children in that vicinity," and "Negroes for sale, a Negro woman 24 years of age and 2 children, one 8 and the other 3 years, to be sold separately or together as desired." This condemned slavery in the slaveholder's own words. Stowe pored over the advertisements while her masterpiece took shape, reportedly even sleeping with the book under her pillow. Uncle Tom's Cabin was published in serial form over 9 months in an abolitionist periodical in 1851, and then in book form in the summer of 1852. Recognition came at once, as abolitionists nationwide embraced the novel as their standard, and 8 power printers working continuously struggled to meet the demand of an unprecedented bestseller. Across the Atlantic, millions of copies sold in Britain and Europe, profiting Stowe nothing, as no international copyright treaties had yet been signed. Nevertheless, she traveled to England in 1853, where she was met by adoring crowds. Stowe's story provoked extreme emotional responses, both positive and negative. Outraged Southerners accused Stowe of fabricating lies about slavery. One Southern editor told the book's reviewer, "I would have the review as hot as hellfire, blasting and searing the reputation of the vile wretch in petticoats that could write such a volume." Stowe responded to these accusations by citing the slave owner's own words back to them from the Southern ads she had diligently studied. She published this in a follow-up work, A Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was this book of evidence that President Lincoln checked out of the Library of Congress as he geared up for the political fight over the emancipation of slaves in 1862. Historian James McPherson, author of The Battle Cry Freedom, called Uncle Tom's Cabin the most influential indictment of slavery of all time. The New York Times said its influence was second only to the Bible. And indeed, Tom sold more copies in the 19th century than any book except the Bible. It is often called the first bestseller. It was a phenomenon. In a regrettable turn of events, later stage renditions, based loosely on the story, known as Tom shows, portrayed Tom as a groveling older man with poor English and a submissive attitude. However, these repugnant performances created a character based on racist stereotypes who bears little resemblance to the noble hero of Stowe's bestseller. If you've read Uncle Tom's Cabin, let me know in the comments, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the story as well. On December 31st, 1862, a large crowd of abolitionists met at the Music Hall in Boston to ring in the new year. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was to take effect at midnight. On the stage, Harriet Tubman, Wendell Phillips, and Frederick Douglass addressed the cheering crowd. William Lloyd Garrison wept for joy. The crowd began chanting the name of Harriet Beecher Stowe, who stood up in the balcony, her eyes aglow with tears. She had done as much as anyone to make that moment happen. Stowe went on to write 29 more books, and after the war, she took up the cause of women's suffrage. Though she would not live to see women gain the right to vote, her efforts and prestige made an important contribution to the movement's eventual success. Harriet Beecher Stowe died on July 1st, 1896 in Hartford, Connecticut at age 85. Thank you for watching. Please give the video a like and say hello in the comments. We are a small channel, and for some reason, the YouTube algorithm loves it when people comment. So that is one way to help more people see these videos on brave women shaping history.